sure that you're familiar with the terms climate change and global warming. They are common environmental issues which continuously flood the news and put pressure on businesses, raising awareness to ensure that we all minimise our carbon footprint. A topic which is often forgotten about is ocean acidification. If you, like me, enjoying feasting on extravagant delicacies such as oysters, mussels and scallops, or if not, and you prefer to swim in the ocean or have plans to visit the Great Barrier Reef one day, you need to keep watching. Because in as little as 20 years from now, the ocean as we know it could be irreversibly changed forever. I'm Carrie-Anne Pałzeski, and welcome to today's episode of Next Exit the Future. Unless you're a scientist, you probably have not come across the term ocean acidification. Today's episode aims to raise awareness on this relatively unknown environmental issue. We sent our correspondent Michael to the Marine Science Department of the University of Miami to talk to the experts and find out just what ocean acidification is.
Now I'm here at the University of Miami Rosenstiel School of Marine Science, one of the leading institutes for research on ocean acidification. Let's see what we can find out.
My name's Emma Ponce, and I'm a research assistant at University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science.
Well, to me, ocean acidification it's in the name. It's literally the ocean water becoming more acidic. And as kind of a biological chemist, one of the main drivers of ocean acidification is dissolved CO2 into the world's oceans. And that largely comes from anthropogenic sources, so human sources. Humans burning fossil fuels releases CO2 into the atmosphere, which is then absorbed by the world's oceans. And a lot of other things like, driving cars. When you're burning fossil fuel, you're releasing CO2 into the atmosphere, and it's being dissolved by the water. And there's a chemical reaction that happens when CO2 is dissolved in ocean water that basically makes the water acidic. It's adding protons into the water that makes it acidic.
So we've heard that ocean acidification is caused by the absorption of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by the ocean, which leads to a decrease in the pH levels of the ocean water. But what is the effect?
Ocean acidification has a detrimental effect on small microorganisms at the lower end of the food chain. Organisms like corals need shells to survive. Higher levels of acidity means lower pH values of the water and basically kills these microorganisms. This demise of species on the very low end of the food chain has a huge impact on larger animals since their nutrition virtually disappears. This impacts the entire food chain from the very bottom to the very top, meaning humans cannot extract seafood and fish from the oceans any longer. The ocean provides a healthy meal to roughly 1.2 billion people a day. As a result, these people may lose their main source of food.
This sounds terrible. How has ocean acidification developed over time? Let's get back to Michael. Maybe he can provide some insights.
I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Do the levels of ocean acidification have increased or decreased over the last, let's say, 20 or 30 years?
Ocean acidification has definitely increased over the past decade, and that's definitely related to pH values. So the pH has dropped significantly in the past decade, and there's a lot of research that shows that.
Okay, and what type of research do you do with?
So right now we have an experiment going on where each one of these tanks is a different concentration of CO2 and a different temperature.
Okay.
And we want to see how the coral's growth rate and different physiological aspects, like how fat it is, how much it weighs, how they do under these different temperature and CO2 treatments.
Ocean acidification as one of the 9 planetary boundaries has hit unprecedented levels. Therefore, it has become a major threat to the entire ecosystem. Modeling demonstrates that if we continue to release CO2 on current trends, and if we cannot slow down our carbon dioxide emissions, ocean acidity will increase by a striking 170% until the end of this century. This rate of acidification is 10 times faster than any acidification over the course of the last 55 million years. So our marine life has never experienced such a fast rate of change before. Back to Carrie Ann.
Thank you for sharing your investigations in Miami with us, Michael. Okay, so we've learned what ocean acidification is and what its effects are. But what does this mean for business and the economy? And how can business reduce its impact on this environmental problem? In the studio today, we have two special guests. Claudia, a consultant in the transportation industry, and Natalia, from the movement Our World, Our Planet. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Carrie.
So Claudia, why do businesses need to think about ocean acidification? What do they have to implement? Do you have any examples?
Yes, Carrie-Anne. As we have seen in the video, the effects of CO2 emissions, like climate change and ocean acidification, are serious topics. For example, in my field, transportation, the development of electric cars, buses and trains is making huge progress, and some vehicles have already been launched to the market. There are so many startups which aim to redefine our existing ways of transportation, like car sharing, which has a very positive effect on the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions. A lot has already been accomplished and we are on the right track.
You can't be serious. CO2 emissions have been rising for the past 120 years. Pretty much each year marked a new record high in terms of CO2 emissions and therefore also in terms of ocean acidification. Even today, from a global perspective, the growth rate of CO2 emissions is still rising. The ocean is one of the most important ecosystems, is brutally threatened, and is about to collapse. If we continue this way, by the end of 2050, pretty much all the planetary boundaries will be crossed.
Those are really frightening facts. Thank you for that insight though. It seems really important that we all try to minimise the effect of ocean acidification. The question now is, what can be done by businesses about that?
As I said, in the business...
Well, carbon dioxide is related to energy, energy is related to economic growth, and therefore, as we argue that we need to reduce the threat of CO2 emissions and ocean acidification, we will have to change the way we produce and use energy and rethink our environmental impact in general. You work as a consultant in transportation. Think about the shipping industry. In a single year, 15 of the world's biggest ships may emit as much CO2 as all the world's 950 million cars.
So we know ocean acidification is real, it's happening now, and it's going to affect our future. Can we all agree on this? So what needs to be done to curb CO2 emissions, and thereby also preventing further ocean acidification?
It is outrageous to believe that we will stop flying or cruise ships won't be in exist 10 years from now. We simply have to find market-based solutions, which also put a fair price tag on the consumption of energy and the emission of CO2. As a globalized world, we simply have to become smarter, adopt better technologies much quicker, spur innovation and find ways to better connect business, society and the natural resources.
Just think about our hometown Munich. In an election at the beginning of November, which was initiated by our movement, a majority of Munich residents decided that the existing coal plant needs to shut down as soon as possible. Distant heating, wind farms and solar parks, all these renewable energies are moving forward and replacing fossil energies.
From my experience as a consultant, there is another point which needs to be mentioned. The next generation of business executives have a different view on climate change than today's leaders. We have all been educated and we understand the problem. I have worked with a number of corporations which have extended their supply chain and thereby their incorporated energy sourcing and CO2 emissions. This is really a big issue for them. Companies want to go green and show to the rest of the world what they can achieve without doing harm to the environment.
Thanks, Natalia and Claudia. We'll have to leave it there for today. Hopefully, after watching today's episode, you are now a little bit more aware of what ocean acidification is, how it's caused, and what the consequences are. Remember that each and every one of us can make a difference. This difference might be small, but in reality, it is individual small drops of seawater that make up the vast ocean. Therefore, we need to remember what the ocean means to us and why it is important to protect it.
Well, in Cuba it's our life. It has been there for generations and hopefully it will be there for generations to come.
For me, oceans is freedom and this sense of peace and tranquility.
Ocean for me means the Mediterranean Sea. As Latin said, Mare Nostrum. I was born there. I went there to fishing, having fun with friends, swimming. So for me, the Mediterranean Sea is my life.
For me, the most important source of food, life, and energy.
Ocean brings it all together.
And only all together we can protect it.